Today we're talking character arc in Memoir. The good news is you already know who the main character is of your story. Unless you're writing someone else's memoir, you are the main story. You are the protagonist, and we need to look at what are the qualities you bring to your memoir that will make your memoir compelling. Let's start with the elements that make for a good protagonist. A strong protagonist often has elements of being likable, and trustworthy, and a voice of authenticity. But we don't want to just build that image in our persona. We need, in order to have a voice of authenticity, we need to have a real honesty about our shortcomings, our flaws, our struggles, our challenges. And in fact, these shortcomings, these challenges we have, these questions we have about issues in our lives, or things we've believed before that later on we come to doubt, those become the elements that create for us the quality of a good protagonist. You need to look at the different aspects of your own personality. We're pretty good at looking at other people and picking apart where they have shortcomings, what we like about them and what we don't like about them. In developing a good, strong character, you need to do the same for yourself. You need to look at your story and see your attributes and your shortcomings. You need to see what's good about you, where you have an authentic voice, where you're likable, you're trustworthy, the reader will connect with you. But they will also connect with you when you reveal more about the complexities of your nature, the dilemmas you have, the flaws, the shortcomings, things that other people pretty much don't like about you. You need to showcase in some way in your memoir. And when you do that, that now makes you a strong protagonist. But it's not just putting out in front of everybody on the page your shortcomings. Your shortcomings have to interact with the storyline of your story. So we have character with flaws interacting with events and personalities in the story that work together. The whole point of writing your memoir is to see it as a cohesive whole. And so when you see it as a cohesive whole, you are the main character. The main character is pivotal to a story because it drives it and moves it forward. And when that character, who now changes, and that's what we're going to get to, the whole point of the story is that this character changes. When this character changes, by interacting with the events and the personalities in the story, we now get a story arc and a character arc that will often work in tandem. And they're going to work through 3 stages. So let's look at those 3 stages. The 3 stages of the character arc are essentially, who was I? Who am I today? And how did I get from there to here? What changed in the meantime? What intervened to make me change? Many of us don't change until there's something that spurs us on, until there's something that actually causes us to become uncomfortable about a situation and start to ask questions, or start to say, this isn't how I want to be, or this isn't right, this is how our family has always been, but something doesn't fit here, something's not right. Or we might feel that our whole life is just hunky-dory the way it was, and then some calamity happens, it throws us into chaos, and now we have to rethink who we are and how we're going to live our lives. And so there are then these 3 stages of character arc: orientation, disorientation, and reorientation. So when you're looking at your story arc and your character arc, we're looking at these 3 phases. What is the orientation in your story? What is the norm where your story starts out? So for example, I'll use a book like Educated by Tara Westover, or perhaps The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. In those books, they have an upbringing in their own home that for them, that's the norm. That's how they live. They have a dysfunctional home, alcoholic home, or a home with a parent with schizophrenia, mental illness, something along those lines. that the chaos they live in is actually quite normal for them. That's how life is at home, and that is the orientation phase for them. Then they go into a disorientation phase, and the disorientation phase could be where as they grow up, they start seeing other things outside their own lives that has them start to question, is this normal? Is this how other families operate? Is this how other families do things? Is this how I want to do things? What is the longing I see in another family that I want for myself? And then there's this disorientation that happens that upsets the apple cart. The thing with families and the thing with stories is when one person changes, it actually causes others to retaliate. And they retaliate because they don't want you to change. They don't want you to upset what we know to be the norm. And so a lot of chaos, a lot of conflict then happens with other characters in the story. And what does that look like? Perhaps you'll even turn it a little bit on the head and you could have a really good, happy life. Something happens, perhaps a marital infidelity, perhaps some violent act, perhaps even just a longing that this is dead boring and I want a more exciting life. And then what happens in this time of disorientation? What happens when one person, you in your story, make choices, decisions, grapple with questions, start to upset the status quo, start to turn things around? What happens to you and to the people in your story? How do they respond? And so we now have conflict, we now have challenges, we now have things we have to work out. And as the story progresses, we reach the apex. And the apex is usually at about 3/4 of the way through your story. Depending on how you divide up the 3 phases, how much you give to building the story arc and building the character arc with orientation, how much with disorientation, and then with reorientation, that could even come as early as 2/3 of the way through the book. Perhaps you need to spend more time right here on reorientation, but perhaps it will come just a little bit more towards 80%. Your story will dictate it, but pretty much between 2/3 and 3/4 of the way, you've built the first phase, you've built through the second phase, orientation, disorientation, the apex, and that is where something triggers, something happens that you make an aha moment in your story. There's something that comes together that you go, this is it. Often, perhaps it's acceptance of the situation, that it's not going to change, but I'm going to change. Perhaps it's some sort of understanding that's deeper, that makes you more compassionate. Perhaps it's realizing this is now or never and I'm going to do it. I'm going to dive in. Whatever it is, there's this apex, there's this climax that comes in your story, which now says, this is the turning point. I've grappled, I've struggled, we've had our challenges, we now have this turning point, and after this, now the story changes to resolution and to reorientation. The reorientation is you, how you may see life differently, how you may now interact with your life differently. Because you've reached a point of acceptance or perhaps some submission to the circumstances that you can't change, but you're going to change, or perhaps it's grabbing the situation and going forward, whatever it is in your life that is the apex, that is the climax of your story, there is now this reorientation of who you are and how you're going to live your life forward, how it's going to be different. And that is really now the reorientation plays a really crucial part, because in building through the orientation and the disorientation as part of your character arc, you have drawn the reader through your struggles. They've seen your struggles, they've identified at some level with your struggles, your challenges, your quest for adventure, and now you've reached this apex, and in the resolution you're offering to the reader hope. And that's a crucial part of the story, is that you are offering them hope. Every story needs a good story arc, a good character arc, and some form of resolution and redemption and hope. Without it, your reader will go away feeling totally deflated, totally like, oh, what was the point of that? Now, it doesn't need to be starry-eyed, life is forever happy and never will we have another concern or worry in the world. These aren't fairy tales. These are true life stories. What you want though is some element of resolution, even if the situation is so dire that perhaps it can't change and you've come to accept that. Perhaps you need to walk away from it. Just like Tara Westover did with Educated, where she came to accept her family will not change or are not changing, and until they do, she can love them, but she cannot be with them, and she cannot be in their lives, and they cannot be in her life. That is a hard place to come to, but she came to it with some level of peace, with some level of acceptance, without any hard heart of unforgiveness, but just a realization and an acceptance that that's how it is. That is a great hope she can offer the reader, that perhaps some difficulty in my life, I can come to that terms as well, and I can make the tough decision to say, this is where I draw the line, and now this is how I'm going to live my life. And where I draw the line, that is my apex. So those are the elements of a good, strong character arc. So have a look at your story, your memoir, and actually see where your story fits into these elements. Where your story works with these three phases, works with the apex, works with the climax, and what the hope is that you extend to the reader. In order to look into this deeper, I suggest you get a memoir that's very much along the lines of the type of memoir you're writing. And then look at it very closely. Look at where is the orientation phase. What was happening in that orientation phase? What triggered the writer to move from the orientation phase into the disorientation phase? What happened? How did the other personalities in the story react to this phase? What other challenges did the writer have to grapple with? What flaws, what issues came out for them? Where was the apex in the story? Have a look at where it was, which chapter, how far into the story. Is it at 2/3 mark, the 3/4 mark? What happened? What was the defining moment? What triggered them? What did they come to a resolution about? And then what was the falling action? Where did this character now come to a place of reorientation? What did they do? What was the redemption in the story? What was the hope they held out to the reader, to you as the reader? And that's what you're looking for when you develop character arc in your story. If you have any questions, if you want some other topics to be discussed, put them down below and I'd be very happy to talk to you about them. I love writing, I love grammar, I love teaching, and I love this, being able to share this knowledge with you, because I learn too. I'll see you next time.